Hello. Hi, I'm Zage, a high vibe pop artist and ceremonialist, here to make the world a more beautiful place using my voice. And welcome to another episode. So, last episode, we talked about quantum leaping and how you can't take everything with you. So, today we'll be talking about how to actually let go of those things so this process can be a little bit more graceful with the least amount of resistance as possible. And so, when there is someone or something that is no longer an energetic match for your reality and it has to go, here are some ways that I make that letting go process a little bit easier. So, for me, a huge part of the letting go process is feeling the grief for that thing. So, just as an example, as I was losing my last relationship, marriage, the very first thing I did was allow myself to feel the grief for that no longer being a part of my life. And of course, that is grieving the relationship itself, but it's also grieving the future that you thought you would have. So, in the context of a relationship, I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with this person. So, grieving the life that I thought I was going to have. And at the same time, I think another important part of that grief is to grieve the perceived potential of it. So, you're not just grieving like all the good times you had and the reminiscing on the past, although that is part of it, but you're also allowing yourself to feel the grief for what could have been. That part can be really challenging because it's like hope, this thing that you made up in your mind, because that truthfully isn't the reality of the realm that you were in that situation. So, in the context of a relationship, we can have all of these ideas of how things could have panned out, where we would have ended up with this person, all of those different uh, components. But was that happening now? No. So, it's not real. You're grieving the perceived outcome, the imaginary outcome that you created in your mind. So let yourself grieve that, but also anchor in reality. Anchor into the reality of like what it was, not what you thought it could be. And I found that particularly helpful, especially because I love journaling. I think journaling is a really important practice to help you anchor in what you're feeling, to get it all out, and also to reflect. So, as I was going through that process of feeling my grief for the perceived potential of the relationship, I went back on my journals from the time that we were together and I read how I was actually feeling. And I realized that a lot of the time I felt pretty unmet. A lot of the time I felt um, grateful to be in a relationship, but not grateful for the current circumstances um, of like the depth of the all of these like different parts that that didn't align with what I desired in partnership. And so tuning back into the truth of the situation can be really helpful, especially if you journal, reflect back on the time in your life when you had that thing. Were you actually happy? Or were you just holding on to the perceived potential of that thing? Ask yourself these questions and reflect back with radical honesty. And I know that that can be challenging sometimes, but you can do it. As I reflected back on how I was actually feeling when I was in the relationship, it made me realize that it didn't align with what I had wanted. And of course, like I had the attachment to the person, and so I wanted it to be them. I wanted it to be us till the very end, and I wanted it to work out. But it was all at the end of the day just ideas about what could be, what could have been. It wasn't the reality of the situation. As you reflect on the reality of the situation, it can also help remove those rose colored glasses that you may have had. I was looking at this person through the filter of my love, through the filter of my heart, and it was blinding me from a lot of things that weren't aligning with my values. There were a lot of parts of this relationship that didn't match up with what I wanted for myself in partnership. The level of depth and connection that I so deeply desired just wasn't happening. That is and that's the reality of the situation. And when I was able to get really honest with myself about the reality of the situation, I was able to see it from a higher perspective and be able to understand why I couldn't take it with me. Even though I was so down bad for that man, I recognize now that it was the biggest blessing for me. And for me, this is where the divine truly stepped in, because through that reflection, I was able to realize that in hindsight, it wasn't the best relationship for me. It didn't align with my values and what I want to have, and like what I desire in intimacy and in partnership. Um, but I would have never let go. And so the divine had to step in and remove that from my life so that I had the spaciousness to receive that which I desired. Because I had been working on myself for a while. I had been, doing all of this work to unpack limiting beliefs and get to know myself on a really deep and intimate level. And if the other person or the other um, situation or job or whatever, if whatever it is no longer a vibrational match for you, then it will exit. It has to go because it's no longer resonating at the level that you are. And that's not to say that anybody is better or worse than each other. That's not what I'm saying here by like leveling up and moving up and all of these terms that kind of sound like it's like a hierarchy thing. It's not. Everyone is operating at the consciousness that they are at. And so if you have developed your consciousness to be more expansive, to see things from a higher perspective, you are no longer going to resonate with the things that resonated with you when you were at a different level of consciousness. And that's not to say that those things are bad or evil or whatever, but they just no longer resonate. And you are doing a disservice to yourself by holding on to the things that are no longer in alignment for you. And you're actually blocking your blessings if you do that. So, the letting go process is key to receive that which you truly desire, that which is truly in alignment for you and your highest good. And so, once you move through that grief of the actual thing, through the grief of the perceived potential of that thing, then the rose colored glasses are off. And so at this point, I found it helpful to reflect back on where I was in my consciousness when I attracted those things. But like looking truthfully, look at where you were at when you attracted the thing that is exiting, the thing that you're having a hard time letting go of. Where were you at when you attracted that? There were friends that I had lost that I was like partying with and when I was younger and living this life of recklessness um and I am not there anymore. I have spent the last few years like um getting to know myself and healing the root cause of what caused me to take those actions. Healing from the root, healing the things that were causing me to reach for substances, to reach for distractions, and um, that made me no longer reach for those things. And so I was no longer a vibrational match for the people who were still doing those things. Um, and of course, there's like a level of, tolerance. Like you can't choose your family. Like there's like a lot of kind of like nuance to that. But I think that it's important to remember that you can lovingly release, you can love from afar. And yeah, just because something is no longer in alignment for you, and just because something is no longer a vibrational match for you, doesn't mean that it is evil, doesn't mean that those people are bad people. They're just no longer in alignment. And so they have to go, and you can lovingly release them. And here's the funny thing about free will is that we all have it and they have the choice to level up too. So if they had been going through their own process, so let's say you've been friends with somebody for 10 years and when you met when you were younger, you were like partying and everything, and then slowly you both started to kind of not be interested in that anymore. Maybe you work on yourself and meditate together or apart and have your own kind of spiritual practices and start developing yourself. Start getting to know yourself, start healing yourself, start taking better care of your body, starting to raise your vibration. Then you reach this point where both of you maybe will be able to go to the next level together. But that doesn't always happen because of free will, because sometimes people do not want to do the work. It is called work for a reason. It's not easy. The wisdom is a byproduct of learning your lessons and then putting them into action. Um, and then, foolishness is like the opposite, which is like knowing better, doing it anyway, and kind of like having the snowball effect occur. Some people I think don't want to do the work. And I think others just aren't operating at the level of consciousness yet to where they even realize they're kind of just like in this loop of behaviors. And I have been there where when I was younger, I was in like a loop of terrible behaviors for a few years. So I have empathy for them, but the truth is you can't force anybody to grow. You can't force them to do the work. They have to choose to do it themselves. And their timeline on that is their business, and all you can do is really focus on yourself. So focus on your own vibration, lead by example, because although you might want to, grab those people who you want to take with you and hold their shoulders and shake them and be like, wake up, like, don't you see that you're doing all of these things that are not good for you? If they're not ready to receive it, they're not going to be able to hear it. They just aren't. All you can do is work on yourself and illuminate the pathway so that if they decide to go down that path, they at least know where to go. Lead by example, work on yourself. And I know that that's like the most cliche thing is just like love yourself, work on yourself, but it really is so true because that is going to attract the people who are also doing those things, the people who are waking up every day and choosing themselves and choosing to show up in integrity with their values. And that's how you're going to attract the people who are your people. And it can be hard to let go of the people who were your people for a long time, but as you work on yourself and develop yourself, that sometimes those people no longer are a match, and so they have to go. And lastly, and probably the most cliche one, is gratitude. So, a big part of the letting go process for me has been deep gratitude for the lessons and for the beauty of what that person, that chapter, whatever it is, taught me and what it provided for me in my life. And choosing to see it from that perspective of lovingly releasing with gratitude for everything that it was and moving forward with more grace, compassion, and love. So, although that friendship, relationship, job, whatever it is for you, although it wasn't perfect, can you recognize all the things that you gained from it? Can you recognize all the beautiful experiences that you had? Can you recognize the lessons that you learned? Can you recognize all of the beautiful experiences that you had through that thing? And so gratitude really is that like final key piece of lovingly releasing for me. And I think it's a good place to start and end. Gratitude in general is just a very, very powerful force. And so the more you can implement gratitude into your process, even if it's a hard process, even if it's letting go of something that you loved so dearly for so long, can you be grateful for the experience of having it at all? Can you be grateful for the love that you did experience while you had it, even though it's no longer in alignment for you? Can you be grateful for all of the times that you had where you laughed and you had fun and you played and all of the beautiful moments that you had? Really sit in that gratitude and thank it for everything that it has taught you. Thank that thing for everything that it has gifted you and lovingly release it. If you found this episode helpful, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. it was just pouring outside, and my two dogs, were demanding that we go outside. And so we went, and it was pouring. And, and now they're all soaked, and it just stopped raining. And yeah, I can't help but laugh because they both just stare at me like, why?